Hello students, myself Ms. Pranita Chaudhary going to introduce the recent programming language which is at boom in the field of software development and testing. Being a part of corporate world, even we should be availed with the knowledge of current trends and technology. So let us start here the skill development program on Python language. Okay. As you know, due to COVID-19 pandemic, we need to conduct this workshop online, crossing over the usual trend of conducting workshop offline every year. Everyone has to watch this video very carefully. Later, for remaining hours of today's session, I'll be conducting live Google Meet session for you, where we will be seeing the hands-on session. But to understand and carry on hands-on session very easily, it's really important to go through the theoretical part. So initially, let us move ahead with the presentation, and it would be good for you to just go through the explanation part first of all, so that you can note down your issues and we can discuss it in the hands-on session. Alright, okay, so let us move ahead with the first slide of this presentation. Okay, so the first slide here will be explaining the agenda or the different topics that could be discussed in the entire presentation. So the first one will be having here is what is Python. Before learning for every language, we should be aware of the things that what exactly it is, isn't it? So that is which means what is Python. Next, we are having differences between program and scripting language. That means what is the meaning of the programming language and what exactly the meaning of the scripting language, so that it would be easy to understand and find out the difference between the programming and the scripting language. Fine. Then the third one will be having history of Python, which basically defines how exactly Python came into existence. Next here we have scope of Python. That means what are all the different areas where we can make use of this Python. Then we'll be having why do people use Python, which basically defines the reasons because of which Python is getting used by a huge number of people nowadays. Then we'll be having who uses Python today. That means what are all the people or what are all the marketing areas or business areas or different areas where Python is getting used by the people. Then last but not least, we are having what can I do with Python. Here we will be basically able to understand what are all the things that can happen or can be done by using a programming language or different programming language, that is Python, probably which is not possible or which cannot be done in different languages or any other software languages like C, C++, Java and so on. Basically right now I hope you are only aware of the C language officially. If you have done classes outside and you are having knowledge of some different languages like C++, Java, then fine. But as you have learned C officially in your third semester, I guess. So right now you are aware. Let us consider that right now you are aware of only C language. So it will be easy for us to compare Python with C, so that it will be very great or it will be good for us to know how can I use Python in an advanced way when I compare it with the C. Alright, so this is what these are all the different things that we have to see in Python, okay, or in this presentation probably. Okay, so here we have the first slide of this presentation, that is what is Python. As we all know, Python is an interpreted object-oriented scripting high-level programming language with dynamic semantics. Now definitely if I tell you this definition, I can understand it is very difficult for you to understand it. So let us simplify this definition by saying Python is very simple language. it is very easy to learn the language because the syntax that has been used in the Python language are very easy, and because of which it reduces the cost of the program maintenance. Now, how is that? As we know that the Python has very wide range of applications, from web development like scientific and mathematical computing to desktop graphical user interface. Okay, so and because of this, Python became very important language in every field of development nowadays. Now, when I am telling you why Python is interpreted language, now what is the meaning of that? Why it is interpreted? Or before that, one more question we should have is, what is an interpreter? When you have learnt C, you might have came across this word interpreter. So what is an interpreter? An interpreter is a kind of program that executes other programs when you write Python programs. It converts the source code written by the developer into intermediate language, which is again translated into native language or machine language that is to be executed. Alright, this means that interpreter is basically a program that converts or interprets your program from one language into another language. Now, the Python code you write is compiled into Python bytecode, which creates a file with extension of .pyc. Then the .pyc file created in the compilation step will be executed by appropriate virtual machine. Now, what is that virtual machine? Virtual machine is basically interpreter that has been used for the Python. So, virtual machine is the runtime engine of Python, and it is always present as a part of Python system. It is an interpreter which will be always inbuilt with your Python. You need not install it separately, you need not download it separately. Whenever you are installing Python into your system, automatically that corresponding virtual machine or interpreter for your Python language will be downloaded or installed along with your Python. So you need not worry about that. Okay, so along with interpreter, you must have heard the word compiler as well, right? Interpreter. So one more word we can have is compiler. Now, what is the meaning of compiler? You must have heard or know this word compiler, even meaning also. So let me tell you the basic difference between compiler and interpreter. Even compiler is also a program which converts the program, any sort of program, from one language to another language. Okay, so like compiler is a program that basically scans the entire program and then translates whole the program, all the program, into machine code at one time. And just because that compilation happens in one time, it takes more time. Okay, now when you come to interpreter, every single line will be interpreted or compiled by the interpreter, and that's the reason, that means one statement at a time will be converted into machine code. That means it takes very less time for the compilation, and that's why the process is called as interpretation. All right, so that is what the Python is. It's a programming language as well as a scripting language, and it can be called as interpreted language just because it is making use of the interpreter virtual machine for Python, which will be inbuilt with the language when you install the language. All right. Let us move ahead with the next slide of the presentation is differences between program and scripting language. As we know, Python is both programming as well as scripting language. Now, what exactly the programming language means and what exactly the scripting language means? Okay, so programming language means basically which the languages which uses compilers for the execution purpose. Whereas if we are talking about a scripting language, it makes use of interpreter for the execution purpose. Then program is, what is the meaning of program actually? Program is normally a sequence of instructions written in order to perform some task. Alright. So that is what nothing but a program. So when we are making use of programming language, we are writing programs, that means the instructions, isn't it? Now when we are talking about scripting language, we have to write down the scripts. So what is the meaning of scripts then? Whereas scripts are always written using any kind of programming language but interpreted within another program. That means you have to write down the scripts by using or by making use of any language, and then you have to incorporate it with some other language with the help of execution. For example, you might not know JavaScript. That means the scripts that will be written with the help of which programming language? Java. And basically it will be executed or incorporated, basically it will be then interpreted and incorporated with the HTML and then interpreted by the internet browser. That means even though JavaScripts will be written by making the use of programming language Java, it will be basically done with the help of HTML, and finally that will be executed on the internet browser. So finally outcome can be seen as the web page, isn't it? So in this way scripts will be written. Basically programming will be written by using a particular one programming language. Okay, so when we see these kind of things, we can come to a conclusion where we can say that all scripting languages are programming languages. Did you understand it? All scripting languages are programming languages. Like JavaScript, yes, it can also be called as a programming language, because for writing JavaScripts we are making use of the programming language, that is Java. Alright. Now when we say, can we say in this way that all programming languages are not scripting languages? That means if you are writing any program in a particular language, it cannot be always called as a scripting program or script. For example, if you are talking about a C program, so if you are writing anything or any program or a set of instructions by using C language, we definitely cannot call it as a script, or that means all programming languages are not scripting languages. Okay, so I hope you understood the basic difference between programming language and scripting language. Okay, now let us move ahead with the another topic, that is we have to see the comparison between your C language, your Java language and your Python language. Now I know that basically you are aware of C language as of now. You might not know or have any idea in Java, and what we have to learn is a Python. Okay, so wherever necessary I'll elaborate the point. Okay, so but basically you can have the comparison between your C and Python. The very first point is here, C is a structured and a compiled programming language. That means C is a procedural kind of a language that can also be called as a structured language, and it is making use of compiler for the execution of program. When it comes to Java, even Java will have compiler as well as interpreter. That is different thing. It will be having just-in-time compiler, and it will also have Java virtual machine, that is an interpreter. So still we will consider it in a as a compiled programming language. Why? You will definitely understand it when you'll understand or when you will go through the Python in an entire way, complete way. Alright. You need not confuse right now. Now then when we have to talk about Python, Python is interpreted programming language. Why? Because Python is making use of interpreter, okay, virtual machine for the execution of the scripts or the programs, anything we can say. Now the second point is point C is making use of pointers. As you already learnt point C, I need not go in that elaborative manner because you are already aware of what kind of pointer, what is the pointer. Okay, so pointers are basically used to store address of the variables, isn't it? Now when you are talking about Java and Python, it does not make use of pointers concept. Okay, it is not there at all. Now coming to the third point, C does not support the concept of inheritance. As you know, C, I am sure that you did not learn the topic of inheritance. That means you definitely don't know what is the meaning of inheritance is. But if you know simple English meaning of inheritance, it is like in hereditary kind of a thing. Like you have first generation, like your grandparents, then you have a second generation, that is your parents, then you have a third generation, that is you. Alright, so this kind of a thing can also be used in a programming thing. So this concept basically was not there in C programming, but coming to Java and Python, it is there. But even Java does not support multiple inheritance. Okay, now what is the meaning of multiple inheritance? If you have to talk, okay, I'll just show you via diagram here. When you have one class and when you have another class, let us consider you have class A here and you have class B here. Alright, now by using these two, when you are coming to one class, that means by making use of class A and class B, you are developing one more class or a new thing, that is C. Okay, that means C is generated by making use of A and B. Then this kind of concept is basically called as multiple inheritance, which is even not possible in Java. Java only supports inheritance except multiple inheritance. But coming to Python, even Python will provide this concept of multiple inheritance easily. Okay, fine. Then we have, okay, we have done with the first point, second point, third point. The second next is, it is compulsory in Java, it is compulsory to declare variable types. Yes, I think as you have done the programming by using C, definitely you remember when you have to define any variable. For example, I have a variable A is equal to, I have to assign some value to that, that is 3. So in that case, I cannot simply write A is equal to 3. If you do so, your compiler will give you the error. So in this case, what you have to do is, you have to declare the type of that particular variable A. That means you should write here as int A is equal to 3, because 3 is a complete value, integer value, and that's why the type of variable is integer. Isn't it? Fine. So even in Java, that variable declaration or the type of variable declaration is compulsory. But when you are talking about Python, this type variable declaration is need not necessary. That means whenever you are writing any program or script in Python, there is no need of writing int A is equal to 3. Directly you can assign the value. How is that? You can simply write A is equal to 3. Okay, here you need not type or need not write the value or type of that particular variable. No need of integer, no need of float, no need of character, nothing has to be defined, because Python will take the variables automatically. There are inbuilt types of variables will be defined into the Python, so there is no need of explicit declaration of type of any variable in Python. I hope you are clear with this. Moving ahead, we have next point, that is platform dependent. Now what is the meaning of platform dependent is? So C is platform dependent. That means wherever you are working, if you are sitting on any one machine that is having some operating system, okay, like we have Unix, Linux, then we have Windows, then we have disk operating system, whatever it is. So if you are working with that particular operating system, then if you are writing program in that system, so then your program can be executed only with that particular system, okay. That is called as platform dependent. But coming to Java and Python, they are completely platform independent. That means program can be written in anywhere and program can be executed anywhere. That means it doesn't matter whether you are working with your program onto the same system or not. Directly you can jump from one system to another system. That means one operating system to another operating system. That is what called as the feature platform independent. Alright. Now coming to the next, C does not support threads. There is one concept called as multi-threading, where one program, what is the meaning of program basically? Program is nothing but a set of instructions, isn't it? And when that program is in a running state, that means if any program is in the execution stage, then that program can be called as a process, okay. That means program under execution can be called as process. So that process basically can be divided into different small parts, and each of that part can be called as a thread. So that concept is called as multi-threading, which is basically not supported by C, but yes, it is there in Java as well as Python. Coming to it, has C has very limited number of library support. There are n number of libraries. There are different number of libraries which are there in C. If you remember, whenever you are writing program in C, you could have written stadio.h, math.h, conio.h, isn't it? So there are all the different libraries which will be supported by your C program. So in C, it will be having very less or restricted number of libraries. When it comes to Java and Python, compared to Java, even Python will have extended number of libraries for programming. All right, fine. Coming to the another differences, we have code length is more than that of Java and Python in case of C. How exactly it means? Like when you are writing any code in C, definitely the number of lines will increase compared to Java and Python. How is that? We will see when exactly we'll go into the depth of that Python. Then C program is a fast compiling program language, whereas compared to Java and Python, Python is bit slower because interpreter has to go line by line. With the compiler, what it will do? Compiler will compile the entire program at a time and gives you the execution. With the interpreter, why interpreter I'm talking about? Because C is using compiler as it's a programming language. Python is a scripting as well as programming, and it is making use of interpreter. So each and every line of a code will get interpreted one by one. So definitely it slows down your execution. Then coming to C, it follows the syntax norms very strictly. As just now I have told you, when whatever the syntax, that means the way of writing the programming should be done very correctly in C. Just now I have given you the example when you have to talk about or declaration of variables has to be done. Definitely it should be written in the form int C is equal to 3 when the type of that particular C variable is of integer type. Even after that, semicolon has to be given, isn't it? Coming to Java, even it follows the same thing or same kind of a syntax when you are writing a program. But coming to Python, even you need not write, just now I have explained you, it need not even write the type of the variable, what it is, automatically or directly you can assign value to anything. Even you need not write this semicolon after the program statement, isn't it? So in this way we can have the difference between the different programming languages like C, Java and Python. So Java, you might not compare, you are not able to compare right now, I can understand it, but definitely you can compare C and Python as you have already dealt with C. I hope this is clear to you. All right. Okay. Python. Now let us move towards the history of Python. So basically, Python has been invented in the Netherlands in the early 90s by Guido van Rossum. Now it is now, but nowadays it is owned by Google. Okay, so Guido van Rossum is the person who has invented your programming or scripting language, that is nothing but Python. So Python implementation was started, that means basically Python came into picture or was getting actually used by the people for programming in started from December 1989. That means you could have not even born in that time, right? So Python came into picture for actual use since December 1989. Now why basically the name Python only is given to this particular language, why not others? So this person, Mr. Guido, was a fan of one of the very famous TV show in Netherlands, and that show, name of that show was Monty Python's Flying Circus. Okay, now just because this person Guido was fan of that famous TV show, he did not get any other name for this programming language better than the word Python, and that's the reason probably this particular language will be given with the name Python. Alright, now the very basic characteristic or feature of this language is, since beginning this Python is made to be open source. Now I don't know, or I'm not sure whether you have heard the name or word open source or not. Probably yes, you would have. So Linux word you have definitely heard, and basically you have used also when you were in colleges or institutes. Most of the people nowadays are making use of a Linux operating system. So what is this Linux is? So basically Linux is an open source operating system. All right, now what is the meaning of open sources? So if any software which is open source can be edited very easily, that means changes to those softwares will be done very easily by anyone, or any changes can be done with no cost. And that's the reason these kinds of open source softwares will be available to people or to everyone with no cost, completely free. And that's the reason they can be called as open source, right? And Python is one of the open source software tool or programming language. Okay, now why there was a need to create the Python language? Okay, so there is one more history behind it. Is actually Mr. Guido was working on some project, and for that purpose he was making use of some programming language. Now let us consider some ABC programming language. Okay, but when he was working with that particular programming language, he was facing some issues with that. At the same time, he was even working with the Bourne shell. Now, what is this Bourne shell means? So, Bourne shell is actually a command line interpreter for computer operating system, and basically it will be used for the Unix operating system. Now, I'm not sure you have heard whether you have heard the Unix about Unix operating system or not. So, let me tell you in very short time that Unix is again another operating system which is a multi-user operating system, and that too Unix is not open source as that of Linux. That means basically Unix is a licensed operating system. All right, so Bourne shell will be used with Unix operating system. So when this person Mr. Guido was working with one programming language as well as a Bourne shell, he found n number of issues in that, and while doing so he fixed those issues, and in order to overcome all those issues he developed a very easy readable syntax scripting language, and that is nothing but your Python, in order to bridge the gap between particular programming language, let us consider C and the Bourne shell. That means, why is it so? And that is the reason basically Python can be used along with any programming language. It can also be used with structured programming language, as well as it can also be used with the object oriented programming language. So basically, if you see, structured programming language is something else and object oriented programming is entirely different thing. So there is a gap between these two, and this gap can be fulfilled by one programming language, which can also be called as a scripting language, and that is nothing but the Python. And that is the reason Python got developed in order to bridge the gap between the structured programming language as well as object oriented programming language. Moving towards the scope of the Python, that means what are all the different areas where basically we can make use of this Python language. So if you see the list of these different areas, you can find out there is none of the area left where Python is not getting used nowadays. Okay, so if you see here, we can use it in the area of science. We can even use in the area of biometrics system administration. Biometric system administration, the better example I can give you about our college or the institute, where each of the faculty will be given with the biometrics identification, and if they have to put their entry, they need to go through that biometrics identification. Alright, so for that development also you have to make use of Python language. Then we have Unix, then web logic, web sphere, web development application or web application development. That means whenever scripting language can be written with the help which can be incorporated by using any sort of language. Okay, let us consider here as a Python, and that will be basically interpreted into the browsers. Okay, that is called as web application development. The next thing we have is a CGI, that is computer graphics interfaces, then Jython, servlets, and then testing scripts. So basically these are the different areas where we can have the use of a scope for using the language Python. Alright, fine. So the next slide here is, why do people use Python? So basically we have to see here what are all the different reasons that made Python so popular within no time. You know, it's a basic human mentality that if you don't find benefit anywhere, we will not refer to use that particular thing. So definitely when n number of people have started making use of this language Python, so definitely it should have little more advantages or more features or more benefit compared to the old programming languages, and that's the reason people have started using this. Now what are all those features which made Python very popular are as belows. The first one is Python is object oriented. You know, basically Python language supports both concepts, like it supports the concept of procedure oriented like C language, and as well as it also supports the concept of object oriented programming as that of Java. Hence, we can get the benefit of both of the languages, structured languages as well as object oriented languages. So there are different, for example, if you have to see security and reusability of a code. Now security concern can be basically used as that of C language, whereas coming to reusability, that means making use of the same code again and again, which is not possible in C, as it is the basic feature of object oriented programming, and that's the reason Python is called as object oriented, and it will be used by many number of people. Okay, the next property or the feature of Python is indentation. Now actually indentation is a practical concept. I cannot just explain you theoretically. When we'll go for hands-on session, definitely I'll show you how it is exactly and what it is exactly. But right now I'll just tell you one thing which is enough at this point of time about indentation. So indentation is nothing but a property that refers to the spaces at the beginning of the code line. That means whenever you are started writing the code for any program, the amount of space that has to be left in the starting of any line of a code, that is called as indentation. Now if we talk about the C language or any other language, the amount of spaces you are moving or leaving in the start of any line of a code is just for the identification purpose or to make the code more readable. That is the only use when it comes to other languages except Python. But when you are talking about Python, particularly indentation makes sense. That means what amount of space or how much amount of space you are leaving before starting the actual line of a code actually makes sense. On that, your errors are also dependent on. Okay, so indentation or leaving the space before starting the line of code is not only for readability, is kind of a programming concept. Okay, so this indentation is very much necessary in Python whenever you are started writing any code. All right, so as we have already know that your Python is open source or free, then downloading and installation of Python is very easy and free of cost. No cost is required for downloading Python as that of Windows. Alright, so as it is a open source, that will definitely see once we'll go for the hands-on sessions of the Python. Coming to the next features of programming language, that is Python, is it's powerful. That means Python is very powerful. It doesn't seems like a sumo palwan as in Japan and all. Okay, but still it can be called as very powerful tool for the development of any applications because it is dynamic in typing. Now, what is the meaning of dynamic typing? In Python, we are not required to declare type for variables. Whenever we are assigning the value, based on those values, type will be allocated automatically. Hence, Python is considered as dynamically typed language as it provides more flexibility to the programmer. So what exactly it means? Now this thing we have already discussed earlier when we have seen the difference in C language and Python language. So if you have to declare any variable in C language, definitely you have to write down the type of the variable. Like you should write integer a is equal to 3 and semicolon. But now coming to Python, there is no need of writing the type of the variable as we have seen already. Alright, direct value has to be used for any particular variable. And that is the reason C language or C or Java or C++, whatever it is, these kinds of languages where the type of the variable has to be written compulsorily can be called as statistically typed language. But coming to Python, how is that Python language is? It has dynamic typing because there is no need of declaration of the type of the variable is required. Alright, now coming to the next one, it has built-in types and tools. That means whatever the data type or type of data has to be used will be automatically given by the Python or will be automatically considered by the Python. Like whether it is of an integer type, that means definitely if you are writing a complete integer value, it automatically takes it as an integer type. Instead of that 3, if you are writing for example 3.5, then as it is a decimal fraction, this kind of value will be definitely taken as a float value. So these are all things will be automatically taken care by Python. You need not write it explicitly because it is having built-in types and tools kind of a feature. Alright, next it has library utilities and third-party utilities. What does it mean? Python has a large and comprehensive standard library. Now what is the meaning of library? Library is something which has a storage of something. Like we have book library where we'll be having n number of books. When we are talking about programming language library, definitely some classes, some methods, or some things, some libraries will be provided automatically or by default with that programming language. Now, as you have already done programming in C language, you are basically aware of some of the libraries that you will be writing when you start the program. For example, studio.h, then you have conio.h, then you have math.h, then you have string.h, and so on, right? So these are all the different libraries that will be provided by C language. Studio.h means what? Standard input output. So whatever functions you are going to use in your program which are related to input and output, every functions will be taken care by the library. Which one? Studio.h. So in the same way, even Python will have this kind of a libraries where things will be taken care automatically, where C will have very less library, okay, but Python will have a huge library, as Python has a rich inbuilt library, and being a programmer we can use this library directly and we are not responsible to implement the functionality. Now, the next concept we have here is third-party utilities. Now, what exactly the meaning of third-party utilities? A third-party module is any code that has been written by third party. Third party means entirely third person, neither you or neither the person who has developed the Python, right? So something which is developed by third person and that thing you wanted to use in your program, even that thing is possible in your Python. So you can simply use them to add functionality to your code without having to write it yourself. Now what is that feature can be called as? Okay, let me give you the very basic example. For example, in our country does not have what we can say, okay, does not have enough amount of rice for the people in our country. Then in that case what the country has to do? Our country has to take the rice from some other country. Let us consider from any neighboring country, okay? Then what we will call it as? This thing can be called as importing, isn't it? So if we don't have anything and if we wanted to take the same thing from some other person, which can be a third person, okay, so that thing can be called as importing. In the same way, when we are writing program and using some kind of third party utilities, then we have to make use of the word import in your programming. IMPORT. Okay, now this importing will also have proper syntax. You cannot simply use as you like, right? Definitely syntax will be given, then according to that, that statement has to be imported. For example, you can write import numpy. Now what is this numpy means? Numpy is basically a third party utility which is basically used with arrays. Now you have already worked with arrays in C programming. So when we have to work with arrays in Python, we can simply make use of this object numpy, that is numbered Python, okay, which will be basically used while working with the arrays. This information is enough for you as of now. The next property or the feature of this Python is why it is powerful, because it allows the automatic or has automatic memory management. That means how much amount of memory that has been allocated to any object will be decided by the Python itself. It doesn't vary according to your operating systems or the platform you work on. Exactly, it means let us consider if you are writing any program in C, then in that case if you are writing the C program in DOS. DOS is disk operating system. Alright, disk operating system is a single user operating system. In the same way, you can even write a C program with Windows. Even Windows is the operating system that you are aware of, right? So when you are writing a C program in DOS operating system, that, and if you are defining any variable of integer type, int a, is your variable. For example, in C program, when you are working with DOS, this int has to be assigned with 2 bytes of memory. Okay, 2 bytes of memory. But when coming to Windows, if you are writing program in C and still your variable is of integer type, even though it has to be given with the memory of 4 bytes. Okay, so according to the platform you are working, your memory management will change. Alright, so but coming to Python, that memory management will be done automatically. You need not bother about it. Now coming to the next one, it is portable. Python programs are portable, that is, we can migrate from one platform to another platform very easily. Python programs will provide same results on any platform. Even this thing we have already discussed when we have seen the difference between C, Java and Python. As we know that Java and Python both are architectural neutral, that means platform independent. You can write your program anywhere, you can execute your program anywhere in spite of your platform or the operating system you are working on, your result will be same for the same one program. But coming to your C language, which is a structured language or procedural language, it definitely matters where you are writing a program and where you are executing a program. Okay, because C is platform dependent. This is what the feature will be provided by your Python programming language. Next feature here we have is Python is mixable. That means it can also be called as extensible and embedded. Why it is so? Because we can use other language programs in Python. As we have already seen, we can embed Python programs anywhere, as it is very easy to integrate with other languages like C, C++ and Java, because because Python can integrate with the structured languages like C as well as object-oriented based languages like Java, and that's the reason it can be called as mixable, that is extensible and embedded. The another feature we have here is it's easy to use and learn. Yes, this is the very basic feature of your Python language, which is simple programming language. And when we read Python program, we are not feeling like we are reading or seeing something different thing, where actually we'll get to feel that we are reading as if the simple English statements. The syntaxes are very simple and only 35 keywords are available. When compared with other languages, we can write programs with very less number of lines. Hence, it gives more readability and simplicity, and that is the reason we can reduce our development efforts, and hence the cost of the project will be ultimately less. So by all means, Python is such an useful and simple language to make use for the software or development. So basically now you are aware of the C program. So if I'll give you the topic or a program problem that you have to write down a program to perform addition of two numbers, what things basically you have to do. Now actually I cannot write here entire program, that thing definitely we will do in a hands-on, but still I wanted to explain you the things in order to understand why Python is very easy as compared to other languages like C, C++, Java, etc. Okay, so if you have to write a program for addition of two numbers, what exactly you have to do? First, in C I am talking about. So first of all, you have to write or define the library #include studio.ent, right? Then you have to write the main program, main function or main method, that int main. Alright, then you have to open a curly bracket. In that you have to define two numbers on which you have to perform addition. So, and one variable for result of the addition. So the next statement, what I can write? Int n1 comma n2 comma sum and semicolon. N1 is my first number, n2 is my, okay, let me write here, n1 is my first number. Alright, then n2 is my second number and sum will be my result. So these are the three values or variables I have to take. After that, what I have to do? I have to write down the printf statement and enter two integers, right? Then I have to scan those two values. So scanf percentile d and n1 and %n1 and %n2. After scanning of two numbers, now I got the two numbers, isn't it? So what I have to do? I have to perform operation of addition on those two numbers. So the next statement will be sum is equal to n1 plus n2 semicolon. After that, I have to print the result. Whatever result I got, I have to print it. So what I will do? Print percentile d and %sum semicolon and then complete that curly bracket. So probably how many lines I will be having in my code? You can count the lines and tell me. Okay, as I'm not hearing you, but still I can understand what could be the answer given by you. So probably in order to write a program for addition of two simple integers, we have to write approximately 9 lines. Isn't it? In which language? In C language. But if same program we have to write in Python, how many lines you will have to write? You'll be very surprised. Let me show you. The only one line you have to write in order to write a program for addition of two number. Let us consider first number, my first number was 3, then my next number was 5. So this is the only line you have to write for writing the entire program of 9 lines that has been written in C language. Okay, so in this way we can understand how easy our Python is in order to understand, in order to learn, and in order to write the programs, isn't it? Okay, coming towards the next topic, that is who uses Python today. Okay, so probably every big industry or a multinational company is making use of Python today for development as well as for hardware testing purpose. If we have to take an example or certain company names, then we can say YouTube, Google, NASA, Netflix, Yahoo, IBM, Intel, BitTorrent, everywhere. That means every huge company is nowadays making use of the Python language for their development as well as testing purpose. It's getting used as an end user customization tool for its popular GIS mapping products. Now what is the meaning of GIS? It's nothing but Geographic Information System. Okay, now if you have to talk about the companies where Python is getting used, that's why just now I told you it's like a YouTube, it's a NASA, it's a Google, BitTorrent, and many more companies that cannot be accommodated in one slide. These are the basic examples of the companies where Python is used at maximum level. Alright, now next we can see as what can I do with Python. Rather, I would like to say what we cannot do using Python. This means everything can be done by using Python. So there are several usages of Python, like it can be used for web development, it can be used for games designing, then it can be used in a graphics, for example animation, then for financial sectors like in a bank for resource management system. It can also be used in a scientific and research area as in NASA for National Weather Services. Then it can be used in electronic design automation, which will be used by Nokia. Then it can also be used in the sector of education, like many of the universities will be making use of this Python language for various purpose. Even your IT certification exam preparation or development can also be done by using the language Python. Even this Python can also be used in a business software by many MNCs like multinational companies as of IBM, Intel, Google, etc. etc. So these are the uses of the Python, or the areas where we can make use of the language Python. Okay, now here we are that why Python will be called as interpreted language in elaborated manner. So basically the language is interpreted. Python is interpreted because it will not get compiled as in Java. Then code is written and then directly executed by an interpreter, and type commands into interpreter and see immediate results. So these are all the three different things because of which because of these three things basically your Python can be called as it's an interpreted language. Now see, if you see the difference here, for Java they have given some execution plan, even for Python they have given some execution plan. It cannot be called as execution plan, rather it can be called as execution environment. When we are talking about a Java, this thing is called as JRE. Now what is the meaning of JRE? Is a Java runtime environment. So Java runtime environment means when any program that has to be written in Java and has to be executed, it has to go through these levels of execution. Code means simple Java program, which will be saved always at .java file. Alright. Now once that Java file will be given to the compiler, Java compiler, it will convert that Java file into a .class file. Alright. And then that .class file will be given to bytecode verifier by the loader, which will then converts that bytecodes, okay, convert into bytecodes. Now those bytecodes will be basically given to JVM, that is called as Java Virtual Machine, and then this Java Virtual Machine basically acts as an interpreter, and then it will convert that bytecodes into native operating system. In this way Java program will get executed. Now coming to your Python, this much of processing is not at all required, as Python is very easy compared to any sort of language. So what happens here is simply your program in Python will be written, which will be basically saved as .py file. It will be simply given to the interpreter for the further conversion of the program high level language into machine language. Then that program will be simply executed and the result will be given on the screen of the computer. So whatever entire execution process that has to be followed by your Java, which will take a very less time, or rather we can say it's taking half of the time required for the Java program execution for the Python program execution. So this is the thing, and that is the reason Python can be called as simple and easy to learn and interpreted language, which is very easy to understand. Okay, so this is how your Java program is, a Python language is. Okay, the next thing is so basically these are all the topics that has been given for this presentation. When we'll see the next presentation or online class or hands-on process, then in that hands-on session, in that we have to see these topics as mentioned below, like what are all the different Python releases, then what is the difference between those releases, then how to do the step-by-step installation for Python, then what are all the different editors that are available for Python, where we have to write the program and execute the program, then how to execute Python program on terminal, that means on command prompt for Windows. Okay, and even as we are working with the Linux operating systems in institutions and all, definitely we should be aware of the different simple commands that has to be used for execution of the Python program. Thank you so much for watching this video, and do call me or do message me on my number as mentioned in the presentation in case of any queries. Thank you so much.